There comes a moment in every person's life when something subtle but profound begins to shift within them. It's not announced by dramatic events or loud confrontations. Instead, it sneaks in quietly, like a soft breeze that unsettles the surface of still waters. This moment arrives when you realize you are always available to others, always answering calls, replying to messages, saying yes when your heart quietly begs to say no, sacrificing your own needs, time, and peace for the sake of others. And then, slowly but surely, you ask yourself, what if I stopped being available all the time? This seemingly simple question is the start of a transformative journey, not one of withdrawal out of bitterness or resentment, but a journey toward awakening. Because the moment you choose to stop being endlessly available to everyone else, you begin the essential process of becoming available to yourself. It's a radical act of self-respect and self-preservation. Carl Gustav Jung's concept of the shadow is central to understanding many of the unconscious dynamics that drive human behavior, including the compulsion to be overly available to others. The shadow is that hidden part of the psyche where we repress qualities, desires, emotions, and impulses that do not fit with our conscious self-image or social expectations. Often, these shadow elements are aspects we consider weak, unacceptable, or shameful. In the context of over-availability, the shadow can include deep-seated fears of rejection, feelings of unworthiness, or the internalized belief that love and acceptance must be earned through constant giving and self-sacrifice. When someone is always available, it's often because they have internalized the idea that their value depends on how much they can do for others. This is not a healthy or conscious choice, but a reaction rooted in shadow material. For example, consider a person who grew up in a family environment where affection and attention were conditional, given only if the child was helpful, compliant, or pleasing. This child learns to associate being loved with being constantly available and helpful. As an adult, this pattern often persists unconsciously. Such a person might struggle to say no or to take time for themselves because, deep inside, the fear of abandonment or invisibility looms large. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that unconscious forces, like the fears and insecurities held in the shadow, can control our behavior if we remain unaware of them. The compulsion to be always available is often one such unconscious pattern. Bringing these shadow aspects into conscious awareness is the first step toward breaking free from the cycle of over-availability. This process requires honesty and courage to look inward and acknowledge the fears and beliefs that have shaped our behavior. It also requires compassion for ourselves, recognizing that these patterns often formed as protective adaptations in difficult circumstances. Moreover, the shadow is not inherently negative. It holds energy and potential that can be transformed and integrated. When we stop running from the shadow, we can reclaim parts of ourselves we had disowned, which brings a greater sense of wholeness and freedom. This inner work explains why simply trying to stop being available through willpower alone rarely succeeds in the long term. The solution is not just behavioral, but deeply psychological. It involves engaging with the shadow, understanding its roots, and gradually integrating its wisdom into our conscious life. The act of saying no is deceptively simple, but profoundly difficult for many people. To stop being endlessly available, one must cultivate the courage to set boundaries. And this is a fundamental act of self-respect. Boundaries delineate where your responsibilities end and another's begin. They define the limits of what you are willing and able to give without sacrificing your own well-being. For those who have habitually been over-available, saying no can evoke intense feelings of guilt anxiety, or fear of rejection. This emotional response often arises because from a young age they have linked their self-worth to the approval of others. When you are always saying yes, you gain external validation, even if it comes at a personal cost. Breaking that pattern disrupts the familiar dynamic, which feels threatening, even though it is necessary for growth. Carl Jung's psychological framework encourages us to embrace individuation, the process of becoming a fully realized individual distinct from the collective expectations imposed by family, society, or culture. Saying no is a critical expression of individuation. It is a step towards self-ownership and authenticity. Consider the story of a woman who spent years always agreeing to work overtime, helping friends and tending to family needs at the expense of her health and happiness. At some point, she realized that her exhaustion was unsustainable. Learning to say no meant facing uncomfortable conversations and even some disappointment from those around her. But it also meant reclaiming her time and energy, allowing her to pursue her passions and care for herself. This transformation involves developing self-awareness and recognizing that no is not a rejection of others, but an affirmation of your own limits and values. It's about communicating clearly and kindly, expressing your truth without guilt or apology. Moreover, setting boundaries has a ripple effect. When you model healthy boundaries, you teach others to respect their own. Boundaries are the foundation of balanced relationships where both parties feel valued and heard. Fear of disappointing others or being rejected is a powerful emotional barrier to reducing availability. It is rooted in our basic human need for belonging and acceptance. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of accepting ourselves fully, including our imperfections and limitations, which can help overcome this fear. When you choose to be less available, you inevitably challenge others' expectations. Some people may react with confusion, frustration, or even anger. These reactions can feel like personal attacks, reinforcing the fear that setting boundaries will damage your relationships. Yet, it is important to understand that others' emotional responses are their own projections. You cannot control how people feel or react, but you can control how you respond. Developing emotional resilience and detachment enables you to maintain your boundaries without being overwhelmed by guilt or fear. In Jungian terms, this process also involves confronting the anima or animus archetype, the internalized image of the other gender that influences how we relate to others. When our boundaries are weak, these archetypal dynamics can lead to codependency and unhealthy attachments. Facing the fear means acknowledging that disappointment and rejection are part of life and growth. They do not diminish your worth. Rather, they provide opportunities to cultivate deeper authenticity and strength. Solitude is often feared or misunderstood as loneliness, but Jung saw it as a vital space for psychological growth. In solitude, the distractions of social demands fall away, allowing the individual to connect with their inner world. This connection fosters a dialogue between the conscious self and the unconscious, between the ego and the deeper layers of the psyche. It is in solitude that the unconscious reveals itself through dreams, symbols, and intuitions. Jung believed that periods of solitude and withdrawal are necessary for the individuation process. These are moments where we integrate previously rejected or unconscious parts of ourselves, including the shadow. For example, many creative individuals describe their most profound insights emerging during solitary moments, long walks, quiet mornings, or time spent in nature. These moments create the psychic space needed for transformation. In solitude, one can also confront existential questions about meaning, purpose, and identity without external noise. This inward journey can lead to a renewed sense of wholeness and clarity. Beneath the habit of over-availability lies a desire for connection, but also a risk, the risk of losing oneself in others' expectations. Jung's process of individuation is about reclaiming the true self, a self that is not defined by external validation, but by inner integrity. Reclaiming the true self means disentangling from the compulsion to please and serve as a way to feel worthy. It involves recognizing that your value is inherent and does not depend on what you do for others. This journey requires patience and compassion. Old patterns do not dissolve overnight. It can be painful to confront the parts of yourself that have been numbed or neglected by constant giving. Yet, as you integrate these parts, you move towards wholeness, a balance between your needs and the needs of others. This balance allows you to give freely, not from obligation or fear, but from authentic generosity. This wholeness also transforms how you relate to others. Instead of relationships built on dependency or sacrifice, you cultivate connections grounded in mutual respect and authenticity. When you stop being constantly available, the change resonates beyond your inner world. Relationships shift. Some deepen, others fade. This transformation reflects the new dynamics of respect and boundaries. Healthy relationships require space and autonomy. By asserting your limits, you create room for others to do the same. This leads to more balanced and fulfilling connections. Moreover, by valuing your own time and energy, you model an important lesson for those around you, that self-care and respect are essential, not selfish. This ripple effect can extend into many areas of life: work, friendships, family, and community. When you stop spreading yourself too thin, you become more focused, effective, and present. In turn, this presence enriches your contributions and deepens your sense of meaning and purpose. Choosing to stop being always available is not a rejection of others, but a return to your authentic self. It is an act of courage and love for yourself and for the quality of your relationships. Carl Jung's vision of individuation reminds us that true freedom comes from wholeness. By embracing your limits, integrating your shadow, and setting boundaries, you move closer to that wholeness. This journey is not easy, but it is profoundly rewarding. It leads to a life where your presence is genuine, your connections meaningful, and your sense of self strong. So remember, when you stop being available, everything changes. And often, that change is the beginning of a beautiful transformation.